Our politically incorrect segment tonight, a feminist YouTuber is being blacklisted by trans activists. Her crime? Saying that being male or female is basic biology. Lacey Green, who has a popular YouTube channel where she discusses sexual issues, she responded to a graphic from Teen Vogue where the magazine referred to men and women as prostate owners and non-prostate owners. And now she's being called transphobic. With me now, staff writer for The Federalist, Bree Payton. Bree, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Bree, this is the most ridiculous story. It's almost funny here. So this article from Teen Vogue magazine, by the way, it was talking about sex acts for teenagers, which is questionable in and of itself. It had graphic drawings illustrating it, but for basic male and female anatomy here, they referred to it as prostate owners and non-prostate owners. That is so absurd.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's completely absurd. And they were doing this because they didn't want to offend anyone by saying that, you know, there's a difference between male biology and female biology. And some of this can get a little bit confusing, so I'll just break it down really quickly. But a lot of people, including Lacey Green, think that there's a difference between biological sex and one's gender. And Lacey Green herself adheres to this ideology and says that you could be born male or you could be born female, but that doesn't mean that you're necessarily a man or a woman one way or another. So, you know, she already is pretty liberal by accepting this ideology and by espousing it. But in her response to this, she said, okay, describing someone as a non-prostate owner, that's literally the same term as female biology. You know, this is getting so frustrating. As someone who talks about these kind of issues, you know, I can't even talk about these things in biological terms.
No, I mean, how do you even refer to someone if you're not allowed to use any of the terms? And I want to show this tweet on the screen just so our viewers can follow along with how confusing this is. So this is Lacey Green. She's a feminist. She's famous on YouTube. She's a sex ed teacher, and this is what she's tweeting. She said, "This is what I'm talking about when I say I can't even use quote basic biology terms in sex ed anymore. Female equals non-inclusive." And then she goes on. She has another tweet referring specifically to this Teen Vogue article. And she says, female and male are not identities. They're not genders. They're biological sexes and refer to someone's literal body parts for reproduction. I mean, Bree, to be honest, that's probably the most common sense thing she's ever said.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And yet she's getting hammered for it, right? I think it's very clear that a lot of individuals in the media and pushing more progressive thoughts and ideologies about one's gender and one's sex have really gone through the looking glass at that point if they're uncomfortable with just describing one's female biology as being female.
I don't know how else you would describe it. Okay, so this is the best part of this story. This is a word, an acronym. I've heard the phrase before. I didn't know the acronym. The acronym does make me laugh. Now trans activists are accusing Lacey Green of being a TERF. T-E-R-F, a TERF. Apparently that stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. Bree, what on earth does that mean?
So basically they're saying, okay, she's a radical feminist and pushing women, supporting women, saying that women should be equal and have the same rights as men. That's fundamentally at odds with the transgender movement and, you know, all of the things that they're trying to push for. So, you know, they're basically pointing out the fact that the feminist movement at this point, or what it was supposed to be, is really at odds with the transgender movement.
Well, that's what I've been saying for quite some time here. I think there's going to be an odd sort of culture war, and it's funny because these are both groups that I would categorize as being on the radical left. Trans activists for the most part, and radical feminists for the most part. And it seems that their ideologies, even though they're pushing for the same sort of progressive policies, their ideologies are at odds because feminists want to use our very gender as a reason to be a victim or as a reason for special treatment. And trans activists claim that there is no gender, which would nullify, I think, feminists' entire platform.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, at this point, it's very clear that many factions on the left are eating each other. And I think that this is a good example of that. And I think you're right in that, you know, feminists like to say, okay, because we are women, because we have differences in our gender, our sex or whatever, you know, we do deserve to get special treatment or special protections in order to compensate for that. But then, you know, the transgender movement really does seem to be pulling a lot of the blocks out of that Jenga stack.
Right, and this is what I've talked about before on this show when it's come to special treatment for minority groups, with no disrespect aimed at any of these groups. People can live their lives however they want to. That's none of my business. But when we start enacting political or cultural exceptions for these people, giving them special treatment, what happens is this is what happens. We have to deny reality, and cultural absurdity ensues.
Yeah, and I think when you look at people through the prism or the lens of victimhood, and when you say, you know, oh, because you check more boxes on the victimhood checklist, you know, your opinion is more relevant or more valuable, and therefore, you know, because I'm a white male or whatever, I can't say as much as you can because you're a minority female. I think when you start to do things like that, and when you start to prop up ideas like intersectional feminism, I think that that really opens the door and ushers in this problem that we're seeing.
Right, and intersectional feminism is a complete farce. That's a topic for another day because there's too long.